She was fading out until his tears hit her skin. The sky above the shattered metropolis pulsed with the aftershocks of orbital strikes. Each rumble sent tremors through the fractured concrete beneath Lucas's boots, pushing sharp, broken glass deeper into the earth. His medic's satchel slapped against his side as he picked his way through the debris, calling out into the ruined silence. "Anyone alive? Can you hear me?" he shouted, his voice echoing, half swallowed by the hollowed-out skeletons of once proud towers. The acrid scent of scorched metal and blood pressed in from all sides, clinging to his skin and searing his lungs. He stepped over a twisted street sign, heart pounding, when something caught his eye, a glimmer, not of fire, but something stranger. There, half buried in a tangle of rebar and shattered stone, lay a figure unlike any he had ever treated. She was tall, her body an ethereal lattice of crystalline facets, shimmering with hues of rose gold and silver that danced even in the ashen dusk. Fiery red hair splayed around her head like a halo, tangled with bits of concrete dust. Her piercing blue eyes, half closed in pain, met his gaze as he knelt beside her. Lucas froze. The alien's wound, an ugly tear beneath her ribs, bled with a strange, luminous fluid. His hands hovered, torn between the instinct to help and the surge of memories. The briefings, the propaganda, the stories of Elysian cruelty. He saw along her crystalline arm delicate geometric patterns etched deep, lines that curled and flared with an artistry he had never seen before. Status? Royalty? He could only guess. She moved suddenly, her hand twitching toward a weapon at her belt. Lucas caught her wrist, his grip careful but firm. Her skin felt cool, electric under his fingers. "Easy," he said, voice raw. "You're badly hurt. Let me help you." He pressed his hands to her side, feeling the unnatural chill of her glowing wound. For a moment, her body tensed beneath him, uncertain if she should fight or trust. Her eyes flickered, bright and wary. "Why?" The word came out a rasp, filled with suspicion. Lucas hesitated, the lies drilled into him crumbling under the weight of her suffering. He fumbled for his medkit, hands shaking as he retrieved a gauze patch and a vial of antiseptic. "Because you're hurt. That's—" His voice caught, but he forced himself to continue. "That's my job." He pressed the gauze to her side, trying to ignore the alien sensation of her flesh, the way her wound seemed to pulse with light. A tear slid down his cheek, unbidden. He barely noticed it until it fell, landing on her skin with a faint hiss. The spot where the tear touched her glowed brighter. The wound's edges shimmered, knitting together in a pattern that reminded Lucas of stained glass mending itself. The Elysian gasped, arching her back. Her breathing steadied. The pain in her eyes receded, replaced by shock. She sat up, pressing a hand to her side. "What did you do?" Her voice, though stronger, trembled with disbelief. Lucas shook his head, eyes wide. I don't know." Her fingers traced the sealed wound, blue gaze searching his face for answers. "Do your people have this ability?" she demanded, voice suddenly sharp. "No," Lucas replied. "I've never seen anything like it." The words tasted like truth and fear. She narrowed her eyes, as if weighing his honesty, then asked, "You saved me. Why?" Lucas swallowed hard, struggling for words. "Because you're hurt. That's my job." He repeated the answer, knowing it sounded hollow, knowing it was the only truth he could offer. The answer unsettled her more than any lie. A distant shout drifted over the ruins. Heavy boots crunched over broken glass. Lucas's squad, closer now, their voices barking orders, searching for survivors or stragglers. The Elysian, Seraphine she would call herself soon, rose unsteadily, swaying on legs that caught the dying sunlight and scattered it in fractured rays. She glanced over her shoulder, gaze suddenly fierce. "If they find me, I'm dead." Lucas nodded, heart hammering. "I know." She lingered at the edge of shadow, the city's devastation framing her like some half-remembered dream. "Will you call them?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No." She touched the spot on her side where his tear had fallen, her eyes distant. "Something has changed between us." Her voice was soft, weighted with possibility and warning. Then she slipped away into the rubble, her crystalline form dissolving into the gloom. Lucas remained kneeling, breathless, alone, his world shaken by a single act of compassion, and by the impossible light that lingered on his hands. Days later, Lucas was cornered in the dark heart of an abandoned refinery. The air was thick with the oily tang of rust and old fuel. He pressed his back to a crumbling wall, sweat trickling down his neck. In the dimness, a silver-white glow flickered, stretching his shadow long across the broken concrete. A figure stepped into view, the light coalescing around her outstretched weapon. Seraphine stood before him, crystalline skin radiant even in the gloom. Red hair caught the light, burning with embers of a distant sun. Her eyes, blue and sharp as laser fire, never wavered from him. All around, his squad lay sprawled, unconscious, their weapons scattered uselessly. None bore wounds. Only the soft, measured rise and fall of their breathing told Lucas they were alive. "Come with me, human," Seraphine commanded, her tone edged with authority, yet laced with hesitation. The weapon in her hand hummed softly, but she kept it pointed away from his chest. Lucas raised his hands, palms open, heart pounding. "If you wanted me dead, I'd already be gone," he said, voice rough. Her gaze softened, just barely. "That's true." The energy weapon flickered out, and she nodded toward a shadowed passage. "We don't have much time." She led him through the refinery's skeletal corridors, boots echoing off the empty steel. They passed through rusted doors and ducked beneath sagging catwalks, the world behind them dissolving into memory. At the edge of the compound, Seraphine motioned for him to follow, slipping into a narrow access tunnel that led away from the city. The passage was tight, filled with the scent of damp earth and old machinery. Lucas struggled to keep up, forced to trust the glint of her form ahead of him. At last, the tunnel opened into the wilds beyond the city's edge, a forgotten land where nature had begun to reclaim the scars of war. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting the world in soft, ghostly silver. Seraphine stopped in a grove of wind-blasted trees. She turned to face him, lowering her weapon. Her composure was impeccable, but Lucas saw the tension in her jaw, the unsteady pulse of light beneath her crystalline skin. "Why did you do it?" she demanded. "What happened to me in the ruins?" Lucas shook his head. "I told you before. I don't know. I'm just a medic. I did what I was trained to do." "You're lying," she said, voice brittle. "No human's touch should have healed me. Certainly not like that. When your tear fell on me, it felt different. I was dying. And then—" She trailed off, frustration and confusion warring in her eyes. Lucas spread his hands helplessly. "We don't have powers like that. I have no idea how it happened. You've seen my medical kit. There's nothing special in it." For a moment, Seraphine's mask cracked, and vulnerability showed through the shimmering lattice of her form. She folded her arms, hugging herself as if to keep from unraveling. "When your tear touched me," she said softly, "I felt peace. Elysians are taught to suppress emotion, to see it as weakness. But now, I question everything I've ever known." Lucas moved closer, voice gentle. "Maybe compassion is a strength, not a flaw. Maybe what you felt wasn't weakness. Maybe it saved your life." She stared at him, as if searching for a trap in his words. "I couldn't bring myself to harm your squad," she admitted at last, nodding back toward the refinery. "I incapacitated them, but I couldn't finish it. That's never happened to me before. I was trained for efficiency, ruthlessness. Now, Her voice faltered. "Are all humans like you?" she asked, studying his face for the answer. Lucas let out a shaky breath. Many try to be, not all succeed. War changes people. But some of us, he hesitated. Some of us still believe in helping, even when it's dangerous. Seraphine looked away, the moons painting her features in cold light. I don't understand how your people survive with so much empathy. Among my kind, that would get you killed. He shrugged, a weary smile on his lips. It's not easy, not. But maybe we can learn from each other. Silence settled between them, but it was no longer tense. As the moons climbed higher, their conversation shifted, the edges softening. Lucas told her about his childhood, before the war, before the world turned to ashes. He spoke of a family lost, of a promise to heal instead of harm. Seraphine, in turn, described the Elysian homeworld, a place of cold beauty, where emotion was a secret language spoken only behind closed doors. Their words built a fragile bridge over the gulf of their differences. They found themselves sitting close, knees nearly touching, the tension of their earlier encounter dissolving under the weight of shared vulnerability. A distant whine cut through the night, search drones, sweeping the wilds with harsh beams of blue light. Seraphine tensed, body flickering with sudden alarm. Lucas scanned the horizon, heart clenching. They're looking for us, he whispered. If we surrender, you might be spared. They'll want to question you, maybe even negotiate. Seraphine shook her head. Your people would see me as a threat, nothing more. I've seen how you treat prisoners. I would not survive their mercy. Her gaze was resolute, pain sharpening her features. Lucas pressed his lips together, frustration and helplessness burning in his chest. So what? We just run? Where can we go? She turned to him, eyes shining with defiant hope. Let's disappear. Neither of our sides would understand what's happening between us. We're both more valuable to them as enemies than as whatever this is. He searched her face for doubt, for any sign that this was a trick, but found only honesty and fear. Lucas's mind raced through the logic of war, of alliances and betrayals, but in that moment, those rules felt distant, irrelevant. The real threat was not the drones, but the possibility of losing this connection, this strange, impossible hope. Seraphine extended her hand, crystalline fingers trembling ever so slightly. Come with me. Choose the unknown. Lucas hesitated, feeling the weight of everything he had ever known pressing against his chest. His whole life he had been taught to fight, to draw lines, to distrust the enemy. But the logic of war had already begun to unravel. He looked at Seraphine, at the flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, at the memory of his tear healing her wound, at the new path neither of them understood. He reached out, his hand closing around hers. Her touch was cool, light pulsing gently beneath her crystalline skin. And yet it felt more real than anything he had known since the world began to fall apart. Together, they slipped into the shadows beneath the twin moons, leaving behind the ruins, the war, and the certainty of old hatreds. In their place, Lucas found only questions, and the quiet, dangerous promise of something new. They found refuge in a cavern high in the mountains, its ancient chambers aglow with veins of luminous crystals. The world outside was distant here, just faint winds sighing through stone and the occasional call of a nightbird. Lucas and Seraphine set up camp beside a clear spring that bubbled from the rocks, its waters shining with the reflected light of the crystals that spiraled up the cavern walls. Their days settled into a rhythm, a partnership shaped by necessity and something quieter, deeper. Lucas gathered firewood and arranged stones for a pit, his breath clouding in the cool mountain air. Seraphine moved silently at his side, her crystalline skin flickering with gentle light as she fetched water, her hands cradling the spring's bounty as if it were precious. Sometimes their hands brushed as they worked, a fleeting touch, but one that sent a spark racing up Lucas's spine. Sometimes, as they tended the fire or shared a meal, their eyes met and held, and the silence between them pulsed with questions neither dared to speak aloud. As darkness fell, the cavern's glow deepened, shadows dancing across walls etched with ancient runes. Lucas watched the flicker of flame, lost in thought, when Seraphine's voice broke the stillness. "Tell me about Earth," she said softly, her gaze reflecting the dancing firelight. "Before the war, before all this." Lucas drew his knees to his chest, warming his hands at the fire. "I grew up near the sea," he began, voice low. "Salt in the air, gulls crying at dawn. My mother used to say the ocean could heal anything if you listened long enough." He smiled faintly. "We had a garden, just a small patch of green, but I thought it was magic. I used to patch up wounded birds, stray animals. I guess I was always drawn to mending things. People too when I got older." Seraphine tilted her head, curiosity softening her features. "You've always healed people?" Lucas nodded, his eyes shining with memory. "It's what I do. I try to mend what's broken, even when it feels impossible." Seraphine was quiet for a moment, then glanced at the place on her side where his tear had once fallen. "And I was broken too," she murmured. "But you fixed me." He studied her, searching for signs of pain. "What's changed since then? You said something inside you feels different." She hesitated, looking down at her hands. "It wasn't just my body. Something inside me is different now. I can feel things, emotions, memories, that used to be distant, controlled. There's a warmth inside me I don't recognize. It's unsettling, but also beautiful." Slowly, she reached out and placed her palm on a nearby crystal embedded in the cavern wall. Instantly, light bloomed beneath her touch, rippling outward in waves that chased along the walls, filling the chamber with a gentle radiance. The entire cavern seemed to breathe with her, as if her presence awakened something ancient and powerful. Seraphine stared at her glowing hand in awe. "I can sense the energy in everything now," she whispered. "The stones, the water, even the air, it all vibrates with life. I never felt this before." Lucas, drawn by the light and the wonder in her voice, reached out to touch the crystal beside her hand. The moment his skin made contact, the glow intensified, pulsing with an energy that felt both alien and achingly familiar. For a heartbeat, it was as if the boundaries between them dissolved, and he saw flashes, images that flickered behind his eyes, ancient beings with forms of crystal and flesh, hands reaching out, healing, connecting. "This isn't just human or Elysian," he said softly, his voice echoing in the crystal-lit silence. "It's something older, something that belongs to both of us." Seraphine's breath caught, her eyes shining. "Since your tear healed me, I've seen visions, echoes of those who once lived here, healers, like you, like me. They chose connection over conflict. I see them in dreams, hands touching, wounds closing, hearts opening. It's as if your tears awakened memories that were never mine, but now, they are." She reached out, her fingers tracing the lines of his cheek where his tears had once fallen. As her crystalline hand glided over his skin, Lucas felt a current, warm and electric, passing between them. In that moment, their minds opened to a shared vision. The cavern filled with figures, human and Elysian, working side by side, their powers united in healing rather than harm. The air vibrated with laughter, with hope, with the promise of peace. Lucas saw himself and Seraphine among them, not as enemies, but as partners, forging a new legacy from the ashes of the old. "Maybe your tears awakened something that was always here," Seraphine whispered, voice trembling with wonder. "Something our peoples have forgotten." Lucas's hand found hers, their fingers entwining, warm and cool, flesh and crystal. The world beyond the cavern seemed to fall away, leaving only this moment, suspended between memory and possibility. Their bond deepened, the space between them shrinking with every heartbeat. Seraphine's hand lingered on his cheek, tracing the memory of pain and hope. Their eyes met, and Lucas saw his own longing reflected in the luminous depths of her gaze. He leaned closer, his breath mingling with hers. Seraphine closed the last of the distance, her lips brushing his in a kiss that was both tentative and electrifying. Light flared around them, the crystals blazing with color, energy crackling through the cavern walls in response to their touch. In that instant, every barrier, fear, doubt, the centuries-old wounds between their peoples, fell away. There was only understanding and hope, the promise of healing stronger than the scars of war. Lucas drew her closer, his hand cradling the curve of her jaw. Seraphine melted into him, her crystalline form shimmering with joy and wonder. The cavern pulsed with their energy, as if the earth itself rejoiced at their union. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the war, not the past, not the shadows waiting beyond the mouth of the cave. For the first time, Lucas believed that peace was possible, not just for them, but for all those who had forgotten how to hope. Seraphine broke the kiss, her forehead resting gently against his. "We can't change everything," she whispered, breathless, "but we can change this." Lucas smiled, his heart full. "Then let's start here." Together they sat in the crystal-lit darkness, their hands entwined, letting the new future grow quietly between them. As the glow faded from the crystals, and the cavern quieted, Seraphine remained close to Lucas, her crystalline fingers interlaced with his. The silence was not empty now, but alive with the memory of light and the tremor of hearts newly joined. Lucas drew in a slow breath, still tasting the sweetness of possibility when Seraphine's gaze turned inward, troubled and bright. "There are others," she murmured, her voice barely above the whisper of the spring. "Other Elysians. It's not just me." Her words trembled with both hope and fear. "We hide it, but there are more of us than the elders know, Elysians who feel more, who dream of peace, who want something different." Lucas looked at her, heart pounding. "You mean, this awakening, the longing for something besides war, it's spreading?" Seraphine nodded, her fiery hair casting scattered reflections across the water. "We pretend to be the perfect soldiers, but the changes are real. Some weep in silence, some sabotage orders, some just vanish. The elders believe they can contain it, but it grows." She touched his hand, searching his face. "Is it the same for humans?" Lucas's smile was faint, bittersweet. "There are always those who dream, even when hope seems impossible. There are people hiding wounded enemies, refusing to fire, whispering about another way. Most are too afraid to speak out loud." He hesitated. "I was one of them, until I met you." Seraphine's eyes filled with warmth and a trace of sorrow. "Perhaps it's time we stop hiding." She rose and knelt by the spring, placing her palms upon the worn ancient stones. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a pulse of light, the network of crystals came alive, veins of energy threading through the chamber in a radiant web. The light arced through the walls, bathing the two of them in a shimmering lattice that seemed to pulse in time with their breathing. Seraphine's voice echoed, trembling with conviction. "This is what was meant to be. Unity, not division. Our peoples were never meant to tear each other apart. The planet remembers. The crystals remember. So do we." Lucas crossed the stone floor and joined her, kneeling so close their shoulders brushed. He pressed his hands into the water, feeling the coolness of the spring, then the deeper warmth that moved beneath it, a current that felt like the pulse of the world itself. The sensation swept through him, dizzying, overwhelming. For an instant, he saw himself as a single thread in a vast tapestry, human and Elysian, water and stone, past and future woven together. He looked at Seraphine, his voice rough with awe. "I can feel it. I'm part of something bigger than myself. It's terrifying and beautiful. She smiled, a fragile hope shining through her crystalline skin. We're risking everything by being here, you know. Both sides would hunt us, call us traitors. Are you afraid? Lucas considered the question, the fear that had haunted him for so long now melting into resolve. Of course, but I'm more afraid of losing this chance, of going back to what I was before. Seraphine's gaze was steady, her vulnerability open. Will you help me find others like us? Will you risk everything to build something new? He turned to face her fully, searching her eyes. Will you love me? Not just as part of this awakening, but as yourself? Without the war, without the crystals, without prophecy. A soft shudder passed through Seraphine. Her voice was gentle, bare. Yes, Lucas. I want to try. For the first time, I want to be more than what I was made to be. They sat together, the network of light around them a living promise. Lucas traced small circles across Seraphine's hand, grounding himself in the reality of her touch. The silence between them was no longer a wall, but a path forward, lit by hope. Hours passed in peace, interrupted only by the soft gurgle of the spring and the low hum of the crystals. Together, they spoke of futures, of searching for others, of healing old wounds, of building a world where fear no longer chained them to the past. But as dawn stretched pale fingers across the mouth of the cavern, the mountain itself seemed to shudder, a low, distant rumble that grew into a tremor. The water in the spring rippled. The light from the crystals flickered uncertainly. Then came the sound they both dreaded, the whine of energy weapons, the sharp bark of orders echoing through the stone halls. The walls quaked as attackers advanced, their footsteps heavy with intent. Blue-white energy blasts flared, sending shards of crystal raining down. The entrance to the cavern glowed with the telltale light of search drones, and voices, both human and Elysian, called for surrender. Seraphine leapt to her feet, eyes flashing with resolve. She pointed to a narrow tunnel at the far end of the chamber, half hidden behind a fallen slab of stone. There, deeper into the mountain, we'll have to leave everything behind, even our weapons. Lucas's heart clenched at the thought, the medical kit, the food, the small comforts they had gathered. But there was no time to grieve. He nodded, squeezing her hand. Fighting is pointless. We'd only become what we tried to escape. Seraphine glanced at the glowing network of crystals, her jaw set with determination. Then let's use what we discovered. Not force, connection. If this place remembers peace, maybe we can remind them too. Lucas looked into her eyes, seeing his own fear and hope reflected there. Together. She pressed her palm to the central stone, Lucas's hand atop hers. The web of light surged, filling the cavern with a radiance that could not be ignored. In that light, their bond became a beacon, a message woven from courage, compassion, and the memory of unity. As the enemy closed in, Seraphine and Lucas stepped into the narrow tunnel, the past echoing behind them, and a new future calling them forward. Soldiers burst into the chamber, human commandos in battered armor and Elysian warriors, crystalline and fierce, their weapons crackling with energy. The ancient cavern, aglow with the pulse of the crystal network, trembled beneath the thunder of boots and the electric hiss of drawn arms. Lucas and Seraphine stood in the center, hands tightly clasped, framed by the luminous spring. The air was electric with fear and anticipation. "Stand down!" barked Commander Harlow, his voice echoing off stone. He strode forward, flanked by a line of grim-faced soldiers. "Lucas, step away from her! You're under arrest for treason against the human alliance." Across the chamber, a ripple passed through the Elysians as a tall figure entered, a being wreathed in authority and cold fire. High Chancellor Lysar, his crystalline form burning with regal light, surveyed the scene with eyes like shattered ice. He moved with the implacable grace of one who had never been denied. "Seraphine," he intoned, voice ringing with fury and disappointment. "You shame your lineage. You have allowed yourself to be tainted by human weakness." He gestured, and Elysian soldiers moved to encircle her. "This ends now. You will be remade, your corruption erased." Seraphine met his gaze, her hand tightening around Lucas's. "Father, please. There's another way. I can show you." "Silence!" Lyser's tone cracked like thunder. "You have brought shame upon our people. Stand down, or you will force my hand." Lucas stepped forward, defiance burning in his eyes. "She's not corrupted. She's awakened. You're both blind if you can't see what's happening, what's possible." Weapons were raised, human and Elysian alike, the line between them clear, the air trembling with the threat of violence. But Lucas and Seraphine, hand in hand, moved to the center of the spring, their bodies aglow with the memory of connection. Seraphine's voice was a steady thread in the chaos. "Trust me," she whispered to Lucas. Together, they pressed their joined hands against the heartstone, the central crystal at the spring's edge. Light erupted, brighter than day, more powerful than any weapon. It poured from the stone, flooding the chamber, swallowing shouts and orders and the fever of battle. The soldiers staggered, weapons dropping as the light swept over them. Faces twisted in confusion, then softened as the light burrowed deeper, lifting memories and emotions long buried. Human commandos gasped, the weight of violence slipping away as empathy blossomed. One fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Elysians blinked, their crystalline features rippling with wonder and fear. Some trembled as forgotten dreams rose to the surface, visions of healing, of hands joined across the gulf of difference. "What's happening?" a young Elysian whispered, his voice breaking. "I remember. I used to dream of mending, not destroying." On the human side, a commando dropped his rifle and pressed his palm to his chest. "I feel her pain, his hope. I never knew." He looked around, bewildered and awed. The lines of battle began to blur. Weapons clattered to the stone floor. Some soldiers reached out, hesitating, then took each other's hands. The connection pulsed between them, a living current, warm and resonant. Sage Moral, the eldest Elysian, stepped from the shadows. Her crystalline robes glimmered with the spectrum of ages. She raised her arms, her voice ringing with ancient certainty. "It is true. What Lucas and Seraphine have found, what the planet remembers, was once ours. Before the wars, before fear, our peoples were united as healers and creators. We have forgotten, but the world has not." Commander Harlow stared at his own trembling hands. "We were never meant to be enemies," he murmured, voice raw. He looked to his soldiers. "Look at us. We're not so different." A hush fell as Lyser fought the tide of memory and emotion. His fists clenched, his eyes wild, refusing to yield. "You will not undo centuries with a trick of light," he roared, his voice cracking under the weight of something deeper. Fear, sorrow, love denied. Seraphine approached her father, tears shimmering on her cheeks. "It's not a trick. It's truth. I remember you, before all this, teaching me about the stars, not war. You showed me wonder, not hatred. That father is still in you. Please, let him live again." The High Chancellor's defiance faltered as the light swirled around him, memories rising unbidden. Her laughter as a child, the quiet pride in her first discoveries, the warmth of shared stargazing. For the first time in living memory, Lysar wept, crystal tears falling like rain. Seraphine knelt before him and wrapped her arms around his trembling form. "Hope never left us," she whispered, voice breaking with emotion. Sage Moral's voice carried through the chamber, urgent and strong. "Both sides must choose now. Unity, not division. Peace, not fear. The world waits for us to remember." Commander Harlow hesitated only a moment. Then he strode to the spring, knelt, and placed his hand in the shimmering water. He gasped as energy surged through him, eyes wide with awe and release. I feel it, the connection. It's real. One by one, soldiers, human and Elysian, followed. Hands dipped into the water, reached for each other, trembling as light and sensation passed between them. Some sobbed openly, years of hatred and loss falling away. Others simply sat, stunned and silent, as hope took root in their hearts for the first time. The chamber filled with gasps, with the sound of tears, with tentative laughter and fragile joy. Old enemies shared stories in halting voices, of families, of dreams, of everything lost, and everything that might be found again. Some clasped hands, testing the reality of this new bond. Others knelt in prayer, or simply stared at the shimmering spring. At last, Lisar bowed his head, the last of his resistance broken. He knelt beside Seraphine, surrendering to the light and to hope. The cycle of violence was broken, at least here, at least for now. Soldiers sat together, their armor discarded, sharing memories and making the first, uncertain overtures of peace. Lucas and Seraphine stood side by side, watching as their bond, once forbidden, became the foundation for something greater. The chamber pulsed with the promise of unity, and the world beyond seemed, for the first time, to tremble with the possibility of change. The ancient mountain became a sanctuary. The crystal-lit halls, once echoing with the threat of battle, now shimmered with the voices of former enemies, human and Elysian soldiers, no longer at war, but gathered to nurture the strange, radiant awakening that had begun. Some moved through the corridors in quiet wonder, their armor set aside. Others shared food by the spring, laughter tentative and new. Between the stone arches, the air was thick with the tension of old hatreds and the fragile hope of something different. Sage Morale and High Chancellor Lysar spent long hours poring over the dust-choked shelves of the library. Ancient texts, their pages luminous with preserved glyphs, spoke of a time before division, when both peoples had walked these halls as healers and creators. Lysar's hands, once rigid with authority, now trembled as he traced the lines of forgotten wisdom, his daughter's presence beside him a silent promise that change was possible. Yet the old wounds lingered. Sometimes a sharp word, a wary glance, would ripple through the chamber, and silence would fall like a shroud. There were soldiers who watched the others with suspicion, hands hovering near weapons, even as they helped tend the wounded or rebuild shattered passageways. But for every moment of doubt, there was another of grace, a shared joke, a lesson in each other's languages, the slow forging of trust. Lucas and Seraphine found their place in the new world beneath the twin moons. Night after night, they walked together outside the mountain's mouth, their hands entwined, the alien sky a tapestry above them. The boundary between human and Elysian blurred with each step, replaced by the shared purpose that had drawn them together from opposite sides of the battlefield. In the shifting blue and silver light, they became less medic and warrior, and more simply themselves, partners in something larger. In private, their romance grew in gentle increments, healing as surely as any ancient energy. By the spring, Lucas would brush a stray lock of Seraphine's fiery hair away from her face, and she would lean into his touch, her crystalline skin warm beneath his hand. They shared meals in the quiet, laughter echoing through the crystal halls when Lucas recounted stories of Earth's oceans or Seraphine teased him about his stubbornness. In the deep hours of the night, they lay side by side beneath the glowing stones, whispering promises for the days ahead. One evening, as the last light faded and the mountain glowed softly behind them, Seraphine gazed at Lucas, her blue eyes reflecting both hope and caution. "There will be those who resist," she warned, her voice a gentle hush. "They'll call us traitors, say we've betrayed everything we were meant to be." Lucas squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing the delicate geometric patterns on her skin. Then we'll show them another way. Together. His voice was steady, conviction blooming in the space between them. Seraphine's lips curved into a smile, tentative at first, then luminous. She pressed her forehead to his, letting their breaths mingle. "I've never believed in anything the way I believe in this," she whispered. They stood in the ancient chamber, now bright with understanding and love, as others began to arrive. First came a small group of humans, their faces shadowed with exhaustion and wary hope. Then Elysians, their movements tentative, drawn by rumors of peace. Some carried wounds, others simply the weight of too many battles. Lucas greeted them with the steady hands of a healer, Seraphine with the open honesty of one who had learned to trust. "Welcome," Lucas said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "This place is for those who want to begin again." Sage Moral watched from the archway, her eyes full of pride and longing. "The awakening has begun," she said softly to Lysar, who stood beside her, his expression transformed by the presence of his daughter and the memory of the unity he had once forsaken. "They lead the way, as it was always meant to be." Inside the halls, boundaries continued to dissolve. Human and Elysian children, brought in secret by parents desperate for a different life, learned to play together in the crystal gardens. Medics from both sides worked side by side, blending traditions, Elysian light weaving with human science, creating new methods of healing. Stories and songs from both worlds echoed down the tunnels, hesitant at first, then strong. Of course, the pain of the past was not so easily healed. Some nights Lucas would wake to nightmares, shadows of the battlefield, the memory of friends lost. Seraphine would hold him close, her presence a silent anchor. Other times, Seraphine's composure would crack, and she would confide her fears to Lucas, of not belonging, of never truly being forgiven by her people. In those moments, their connection, born of compassion and sealed by shared transformation, was a balm against the wounds that could not be seen. As the days passed, more arrived. Sometimes a soldier limped into the mountain alone, exhausted and afraid, drawn by the stories whispered on the wind. Sometimes an entire squadron would appear at dawn, weapons lowered, eyes searching for proof that peace was not a fantasy. Each time, Lucas and Seraphine greeted them with patience and hope, inviting them to place their hands in the spring and feel the ancient energy for themselves. The war outside was not over. Skirmishes still raged in distant cities. Hatred smoldered in the hearts of those untouched by the mountain's miracle. But here, a new path had begun, fragile as the light that threaded through the crystals, persistent as the love that bound Lucas and Seraphine. One night, beneath the rising moons, Lucas and Seraphine stood at the threshold of the sanctuary, looking out over the valley below. The mountain glowed behind them, a beacon to all those who sought a different way. Lucas pulled Seraphine close, his arms wrapping around her slender, crystalline form. She tilted her face up to his, blue eyes luminous in the night. "Whatever comes," Lucas murmured, "we face it together, I promise." Seraphine smiled, her tears shimmering with light. "Together," she echoed, her voice steady and strong. They embraced, the promise between them as real and radiant as the mountain itself. All around, the awakening spread, one fragile bond at a time. And in the shelter of the ancient sanctuary, Lucas and Seraphine stood as partners, as catalysts, as the first lights on a new horizon, ready to lead the way into whatever future awaited them. Our story ends here. If you'd like to support us, you can use the Super Thanks button right under the video to leave a tip. It truly helps our team improve the quality of our work. We're grateful to each and every subscriber for being with us. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.